and gentlemen, welcome to a new edition of the Two Grumpy Bastards podcast YouTube video, except now we're doing our first ever recording of Two Grumpy Bastards Academy. Yes, this is going to be a series of educational videos where you can educate yourself on what actually is objective reality instead of the bullshit that you get from social media, from legacy media, and from the talking heads over on the left. So welcome to our academy. I want to introduce myself. I'm Coop, Professor Emeritus of Two Grumpy Bastards Academy. And Russ, would you like to introduce yourself, please?
I'm Professor Russ. I have a PhD in know-it-all.
Very well said, sir. All right. Before we get started, I just want to tell you, this is not fancy. This is two retired Army officers who like to use PowerPoint. So we're going to present this.
We got very good at it in the Army.
Very, very good at it in the Army. So we're going to present this no nonsense, no holds barred class for our first edition of our academy. Buckle up. It's going to be a bumpy ride. On social media and by a lot of idiots to the left to describe a lot of things that aren't accurate. Fascism. This is the Webster Merriam Online's definition of fascism. I just want to go over this real quick. This is kind of, I think, Russ, an inadequate definition of the word fascism, but this gives people an idea, a political philosophy, movement, regime that exalts nation and above, and often race above the individual, that stands for a centralized autocratic government headed by a dictatorial leader, which we'll take umbrage with a little bit there, severe economic and social regimentation and forcible suppression of opposition. Russ, would you like to talk a little bit more about the nuance of what fascism really is?
A lot of fascism is the fusing of society and government towards one overarching end. One of the things that people leave out of fascism a lot is the merger of business or corporatism and the central government towards the ends of the government. In other words, the government dictates what the businesses work towards, and it subsumes the individual under these paradigms.
Very good. It's good to note that it's expanded from a dictatorial. A lot of people think it's about the individual. You know, that's what we most often associate fascism with. But as you mentioned, and very well, it can often be a number of things, including a group of things, or like you said, business or educational systems or anything like that. Almost anything can exhibit traits of fascism, any system, that is. So why are we talking about fascism? Your question you're probably asking is, why? Why now? Why did you bring up fascism? Well, I'll give you an idea. Yep.
I keep expecting her to go,
So sit back and enjoy this little snippet of AOC on the floor.
Reported are significantly addressing and specifically addressing LGBT issues. This Republican bill is asking the government to force the outing of LGBT people before they are ready. When we talk about progressive values, I can say what my progressive value is, and that is freedom over fascism. Thank you very much.
Russ, would you like to address that real quick?
Yeah, a few things. First of all, she obviously does not understand what the definition of fascism is. Like most leftists on the planet, she uses the word fascism as a stand-in for everything I think is bad. She is also confusing fascism, which is imposed top-down from the government, with parental rights. She doesn't understand. I ran into this issue in discussion with several people recently when they talk about books being banned. Yes, book banning is an element of fascism because they want to constrict ideas. However, no books are being banned. All these so-called banned books, you can go to any bookstore or any library in any state in America and get these things. What they're talking about is not putting some of these things in front of minors who are incapable of a concept known as legal consent. We wouldn't put Playboy or Penthouse in front of minors. And if you've ever read any of these books, and I actually have read large portions of these books, such as Genderqueer, so I have a context for it, they are every bit as graphic as Penthouse, Hustler, anything that we used to sneak and put under our mattresses when we were kids before the age of the internet introduced widespread levels of porn.
Thank you. Let's examine some of the common misconceptions about fascism. People often think that they call it far right by a lot of definitions, which is not accurate at all. It's not left or right. It's a system. Far right, conservatism and libertarianism, and I'd say libertarianism typically is looked at as more further right than conservatism, is really about individual freedom. It's quite the opposite of fascism. It literally is about individual freedom. She's calling parents who are out there trying to protect their kids fascists. That's been bandied around a lot out there by the left. It's insane. You want to pick it up from there?
Yeah, I want to say real quick about the parents aspect. First of all, parental actions are not fascist, as you pointed out. Parents have legal control over their children's actions, what their children read, see, hear, how they live, etc. It can be loosened as someone gets older. Now, there are limits, real quick, just to say this. Some folks want to say it's fascist to prohibit parents from, sexually mutilating their children, like by castrating boys or lopping the healthy breasts off of girls. There is no parental right to that. Otherwise, any parent that thought their child was a pirate could schedule them for leg amputation and eye removal surgery. But for the most part, parental actions in terms of determining what children can read, what their children can read, and what their children can see, that's not fascism. That's called parental responsibility. The left is not anti-fascist. They're just not. They seek top-down control. Libertarianism and conservatism basically says, hey, leave me alone, go do what you want to do. But the left is, no, you and your children must do what I want you to do. That's what they're all about. And they don't understand that being patriotic and being nationalistic is not fascism. A lot of times, yes, there is a fusion of the state with some of these processes. However, it's not limited to the state. It's any large group, whether it's national or transnational. That's where fascism comes in, is when you orient the aims of the group and subsume individualism under these aims in order to achieve the ends that fuse society, business, race, etc.
Right. And last but not least, I appreciate what you're saying. You mentioned nationalism. Nationalism simply is just that. It's more about believing in a system of a country that you are a member of, or admiring a system in a country, and being a patriot could be a very good synonym for nationalism. Goes a little bit more into the construct of what that nation is. Perhaps nationalism is often construed with isolationism to a certain extent, but really there's a lot of nuance to the word nationalism. The idea that it's linked to fascism is a construct that has come up only in the last several years, and it's mostly driven by media and people on the left.
Yeah, and also one real quick adjunct to that is fascism, when it relates to nationalism, is usually about imposing that nationalism upon outside groups.
Correct.
Believing that your nation, being patriotic for your nation, is not fascism unless we were to say turn to Canada and say, by the way, you need to believe in the United States as much as we do.
Good point.
And do it by force.
Great point. And one last point on the misconceptions. Socialism and communism are always listed separately from fascism. There are absolutely thread thin. It's really nomenclature. It really is. It's a matter of degree. They're feathers on the same duck, so to speak.
Yeah. Really, first of all, let's not forget that the Nazis were National Socialists.
Thank you.
The difference between National Socialism, fascism, and communism is fascism will seek to impose from a select group of elites and then provide to the people everything that they are supposed to need. Communism is going to use the people to provide each other supposedly everything they need, but both forms are conducted through force.
Thank you very much. And finally, we could list facts all day long about fascism, but we really don't need to. I think it's encapsulated well here. Go ahead, Russ.
No, I agree. It's very destructive, mostly because it seeks to force its view, like most autocracies, onto other societies through the use of force. It has killed in excess of 100 to 150 million people in the last century to century and a half alone. And it does subsume the individual under the needs of the state or the society, and basically says you need to strive towards our ends, and if you don't, then we will make you strive towards those ends.
Thank you very much. Well, let's get into, just as we start to wrap this short class up, give you some examples of fascists and non-fascists throughout the world and history. So let's look at some actual fascists. We all know that one. For those of you that don't know, that's not George C. Scott from Patton. That is Mr. Mussolini, who really, his regime was where the term came from. Idi Amin, for those of you that are young or don't know who he is, go look him up. What a horrible
Awful person.
murder. What's
Yep.
that?
Awful person, one of the worst people in the history of the African continent.
Absolutely. Then, of course, we have that guy who really is a fascist. If you think about his policies, central control,
And if you
economy,
see
everything.
if you see about the overarching state, just see what he's talked about has happened in Tennessee recently, and his desire to force Tennessee and other states to abide by the national will.
Yep. Here's another fascist who's even worse at a smaller scale.
Gavin Newsom would be a lot worse if he was president. He is one of the worst governors in America, not just because he is incompetent, but because he actively seeks to impose that incompetence upon everyone else.
He is really, I tweeted him back. He replied to one of his tweets. He is punching up at DeSantis, which is kind of funny.
He's trying so hard. He might as well wave a big sign above his head that says, "Please notice me."
Yeah, no kidding. Yeah. I said you're punching way over your weight, and some other not so nice things in my reply to his tweet. Just ridiculous. Going after the greatest governor in America, arguably, and who's stout libertarian in a lot of ways, by the way. Antifa.
Yeah, Antifa is the definition of fascists. They use fascist tactics. They are the new brown shirts. They hide themselves. They use force to try to impose themselves on everyone else and to try to silence dissent.
I think she's a fascist.
Yeah, I can call her Eeyore. She has fascist tendencies, and she likes to wag that finger and get in that voice and start moving that head. But
Right.
She was also elected in a district that, is going to go Democrat no matter what. She shows what happens when you don't pay attention to politics. She is, and she's going to be in there for life. But she is one of the most authoritarian. And what I've noticed is authoritarianism usually comes out of people being stupid, because they can't stand that other people might be smarter than they are. So she wants to simplify the world by imposing her stupidity on everyone else.
Amen to that. And Scar from Lion King is definitely a fascist.
I despise guessing games. Sorry.
The entire woke movement is a movement in fascism. Absolutely.
Real quick, some folks said because there was a gotcha on video where a woman who was talking about wokeism, got basically befuddled and couldn't define it, because it happens to us in the moments. Let me define it here, okay? Wokeism is weaponized political correctness that is seeking discrimination and oppression where none exists.
There you go. You heard it right there from the little pony's mouth, everybody.
I'm a stallion.
Here's some people who are not fascists. The father of our country was absolutely, in every way possible, not a fascist.
He could have been king. He could have
Exactly.
demanded to be king. They tried to make him king and he refused.
That's how anti-fascist the father of this beautiful, wonderful, amazing country was. My personal favorite historical character, other than, that sandal-wearing Jew that I like. Man, it's a tie. All right. That guy's definitely not a fascist. My hero right there.
That's the last president that I was fully proud of. Somewhat of George H.W. Bush after him, but Ronald Reagan set the tone for, 30 years from 1980 to 2010.
Yep. Saved the world from the scourge of communism. I firmly believe that. Margaret Thatcher, and Pope John Paul and their amazing triad. That guy's absolutely not a fascist. Mr. Ron DeSantis.
Ron DeSantis is the best governor in America right now and should be the next president of the United States. Unfortunately, we have, the Republic. This should be an easy win for the Republican Party, given the craziness of the Democrat Party right now. But it's almost like a lot of Republicans have a desire to out crazy the Democrats. And if they nominate Ron DeSantis and stop raiding the local insane asylum for candidates to Senate and the House, then they'll actually be able to take charge in 2024.
This would have been a good place for our stay on target.
Yeah, I'm still right on target.
All right. Tigger's definitely not a fascist. Everybody loves Tigger. I love Tigger. Don't say a bad word about Tigger. All right. And Russ,
Parents who are using their voices to be heard at school board meetings, city councils, and other areas across the land, because you know what? Parents have the primary responsibility for raising their children, not the state.
Absolutely. Well, that concludes our class in fascism. I hope you learned something. I hope you really liked our PowerPoint slides.
Good at them.
You can't beat the army out of the guy. Any questions, please email us at twogrumpybastards@gmail.com. Please catch our podcast on all podcast outlets. Visit us on Facebook group, Two Grumpy Bastards. I didn't throw our merchandise page up here, but we'll definitely do that in the future if you decide you like our classes. There'll be far more to come. Russ, anything before we go into the teacher's lounge and sip our tea in our fine china?
Well, you can, as Coop said, you can send us questions. You can also send us exaltation and praise. I received that. I think we deserve it. So make sure you send us any pats on the back that you like.
Better yet, subscribe to our YouTube channel and our podcast. Our podcast is on all major outlets. You can find us everywhere. So until we see you on the podcast or the next YouTube video, keep your focus and stay wokeless.